Welcome to another episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. I am your host, Tara Woodlee, and today's podcast, we're definitely going to be talking to a survivor who is a volunteer here at Break the Silence, and her name is Sammie Rose. The podcast is for those who want to. Oh, I've messed it up. I done it again. Okay, we're going to start it over, Amanda. They're really going to love me at the editing team this time. I can't stick to the script because if I look over this way, I look stupid. I'm trying to.
Got you. We're good. See, we told you, Sammie. This is very. No need to be nervous.
Okay, let's try again. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Welcome to another episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. I'm Tara Woodlee, your host, and today's podcast is going to be a discussion with a survivor here at Break the Silence. Her name is Sammie Rose. She's a volunteer, and we welcome you today, Sammie, onto the podcast.
Thank you, Tara.
Wonderful. So, Sammie, if you would talk to us about your story, start there. Give us a little insight of your background.
Okay. Well, my name is Sammie. I am Cambodian American. Growing up, there was physical discipline in the household. That kind of dictated the acceptance of abuse for me later on in my adulthood. I was married to someone that I had a history of DV with. I still struggle with the term DV and also with the term survivor, because I feel like I minimize my abuse a lot. I know the premise of this podcast is to talk about cultures, and I feel like being Cambodian was a big influencing factor in how I accepted domestic violence in my relationships.
Yes. So tell me a little bit, because I know for me, the accepting of abuse started with young with certain things that happened in my childhood, and then expanded from there. And I wouldn't say necessarily it was my culture, but it was my family's kind of generational background of accepting this over and over again. So, in your perspective, what led you to kind of accept this kind of thing happening in your relationships?
My dad was physically abusive, and it's really hard for me to even say that because I always looked at that in terms of physical discipline, which is, I feel like when you say that, it's acceptable, right? Yes, I hit or spank my child, and that's okay because it's not abuse. So growing up, I really had this idea that everyone had physical discipline in their households. I didn't realize until later on in my life that this is not something that happened everywhere,
Right.
And I had a really distorted view on it. I used to be scared of my dad. I used to be a little bit fearful of the consequences of being just a child. I wasn't allowed to be myself. And I come from a culture that really suppresses our emotions. So there was never really a time and space where I could say, well, I'm feeling sad, or I'm having a rough moment, or, I feel depressed, but I don't know what that is. Mom and dad, can you help me? There was never space for that. So I spent most of my life up until maybe 3 or 4 years ago suppressing every emotion that I felt. I never had this space to say, hey, I'm not feeling okay today. Can you support me? I never had that in my life. And it kind of dictated every relationship that I've gone into. The love that I wanted from my dad, the way that I wanted it, not the way that he was giving it to me, but the way that I wanted it for myself. I was a serial dater, so I was always in and out of relationships. I was seeking love from all these men, hoping to fill this void that I felt because I didn't receive that love from my dad. It was just abuse. And most of the relationships that I've been in had some form of abuse. And I just accepted for what it was because, you know, at that point, I've always been told, you're not worthy. You're not worthy of love. This is what you deserve. And that's what I thought that was dealt to me at that time. Sorry, can you edit that out?
Yeah.
But okay. So at that time, I thought that I didn't deserve any love more than abuse, you know, because that was what I was always given. And so it was really hard for me to even understand what healthy was, what love was, and that abuse was something that wasn't it was unacceptable. You know, I didn't learn that till recently. So it was quite the journey to get to this point.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure like a lot of people wonder because I'm wondering like where was your mom kind of in the scheme of this? What was happening with your relationship with her?
You know what? I feel like our family dynamic is so unique. So culturally speaking, we women are expected to be subservient and inferior. But my parents had a very unique relationship, I think, personally, the way that I see it. They had like a 100%, you give 100% and I'll give 100%. It wasn't, I'm better than you because I'm male, you know? The funny thing about this whole situation is recently I sat down with my mom to do a school paper, and it was a really tough one because we talked about intergenerational trauma. And she goes, my mom abused me like very bad. Like she beat me in public. It was embarrassing. Like I'm sorry, I got stuck in my words. So her mom beat her for most of her childhood and did it publicly. And she told herself that she would never do that to her own children. My mom has never laid a hand on me. But for my father to do that, I never even asked her why did she allow that to happen. We haven't even crossed that, you know, that part of our lives yet. So I don't know why she allowed that to happen or why she didn't step in or why she supported that. Or if she didn't support it, why wasn't she vocal about it? You know, so in our culture, a lot of parents physically discipline their children. It's just accepted, you know, it's a form to control their children. It's a form to if the child is not meeting standards or expectations, you know, I'm gonna get beat. And sometimes I felt like I was just being beaten for just being a child, for having feelings, or for wanting to maybe have a little bit of fun, especially you know, in America it's quite different than it is in Cambodia. But yeah, going back to my mother, yeah, I don't know why she never stepped in. So I did resent her for a period of time growing up. I felt like she just allowed it to happen. Um, the crazy part of this whole thing is I remember one Christmas in particular, and this is why I hate Christmas. This is the first time I've ever seen my dad lay a hand on my mom, the first and last time. He's never done it before and he's never done it after. I don't even know what the argument was about. We were on our way to go see Santa Claus at the local mall. We were all excited. I was probably in grade school this time. My mom said something and then my dad just snapped. And then I don't remember much, but she was beaten. And then after that happened, my dad sat my siblings and I on the couch and you know, he broke the phone. He didn't want us to call for help or anything like that. He sat us down and he said, you know, I love your mother. You must never tell anyone about this. Do not tell your aunt. Do not tell anyone. And he just kept repeating to us, like, you know, I love you guys. And I was, you know, in shock. I've never seen my dad do this to my mom. I mean, he's done it to me, but this was to my mother. And I didn't believe him. I didn't believe at that time that he loved my mom. Because for me, if you love someone, you would never do that. You would never hurt them physically or any other way.
Right.
And ever since then, I just learned at a very young age that this was acceptable. We don't talk about it to other people. We don't speak up. I never asked my mom how she felt after that, that incident. It's never been brought up again in our household. My siblings and I never addressed it. We're in our, I'm about to be 40, so my brothers are like a few years younger than me. We never addressed it in our family. We never spoken about it. And I don't think we'll ever speak about it. But that moment was just, it changed the narrative for so many things. Not only was my dad physically, I don't want to say abusive because I still struggle with that, but not only did he use physical discipline, but he did this to my mom, and it made me feel like, this is what a family is. This is what love is, and that was just acceptable at that point. So it was really, a very distorted view that I had, especially on relationships.
Well, of course,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And that's so traumatizing for children and confusing at the same time, especially I imagine for you, because the whole premise of, you feeling guilty that you must have created certain things that were happening to you, and then to see, no, it's him, but you still know nobody talks about it, nobody opens
Yeah.
up, nobody
Mm-hmm.
there's no engaging in it or moving forward. Everybody just be quiet because
Yeah.
love is making it so that we don't talk about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it creates a whole family dynamic of pressure for young people as they grow up into relationships about what they really are
Mm-hmm.
and what they have as far as expectations in the
Right.
next relationship, right? So, same is really interesting. We're going to just pause and take a quick break, and we'll come back and we'll discuss some more with Sammie about how her relationships involved. So, stay tuned. All right, so we give it a little pause here so that they can cut. But you're doing really great. You're doing really great speaking up. So,
Yeah, that was hard.
yes, it is.
Yeah.
I commend you. So,
Mm.
okay, so we're going to bring back now in 3, 2, 1. Thank you for coming back and joining us here on Through the Eyes of Survivors. I'm talking with Sammie Rose. She's one of our volunteers. So we were talking about her story and the cultural differences that may be happening also within domestic violence within her story. So Sammie, we talked about your parents and everything. So let's talk a little bit more about the relationships as you got older. And did you date culturally within your own culture, or since you're here in America, did you date just whoever you were liking? How was that kind of thing happening here?
Okay. Well, my parents are from Cambodia and I was born here, in America. I date within my culture and outside of my culture. I really don't have a preference, but for the most of the men that I've dated were, Cambodian. I was married to my ex-husband for less than a year, but we were together for more than that. And we had a history of DV, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to volunteer and step out and speak up against it. When we're talking about culture, just like being born into a family, you are born into this culture. You don't have a choice. And so within that culture, there are expectations and standards and things that you're supposed to uphold. And being Cambodian, you don't really have that space to say, well, I don't agree, And because we're a culture that's based on collectivism, conformity, emotional self-control, and respecting your elders, and all these other norms that kind of dictate the narrative of how one would accept abuse. You know, when I was with my ex-husband, we lived in an extended joint family kind of household. I lived with my in-laws, and it was really hard. You know, noticing my mother-in-law, she was very submissive and subservient to her husband. Um, and there were things expected of her that she expected me to do to kind of follow her, what she was doing. I remember in an instance where an incident happened with my ex-husband, and he threw hot food in my face, he spat on me, he pushed me around, and then at that time we had our first child, and I was hysterically crying because I didn't know what to do. I couldn't leave because I couldn't leave my child there with him. And his mother-in-law sat me in the living room, and her first words to me were, you know, to be quiet. You know, in our culture we say it, "Komot," which is be quiet. And I just cried. I didn't know how to respond to that. You know, being quiet about what's going on in the family household is something that's very big in our culture. We don't speak up when things don't align with our own beliefs. If someone is hurting you, like in this instance, my ex-husband, it's like I can't do anything about it because, you know, for one, he's the breadwinner, he's the male. Coming from a culture that places men on a higher level of women, it's hard to break that mold. And I felt so small, you know, I felt like I didn't have the support that I needed. Um, you know, his family accepted this type of abuse, and living in that situation, I felt like, honestly, talking about it is just it's making me think about all these things. Um, it was hard to leave, you know. Not only you become a victim of the abuser, but you become the victim of cultural pressure as well.
Right.
So yeah, just based on my own observation and experiences, it's just the impact of it. Will keep someone in a relationship regardless of wanting to leave. You know, you don't want to bring shame to the family. You don't want to ruin your husband's reputation, which is in our culture, saving face is one of the biggest things. You know, you don't want to disgrace the family.
Right.
You know, and with my ex-husband, you know, my happiness didn't matter. It was contingent on his happiness. As long as he was happy, as long as he looks good, as long as there's this facade that we created for everyone to see like we were the perfect relationship, then everything was okay because reputation is highly valued. And at the end of the day, it took me years to process what I've been through. I didn't even seek help right away. When we divorced, he left me in a fit of rage, and I told myself at that time, like, you know what, this is it. I'm not going to take him back no matter what. I'm not going to fall for it. That whole entire honeymoon phase, I'm just not going to fall for it. You know, I have 2 children by now, and I needed a better life for them and myself. And coming into terms with that, the first thing that I did was suppress. I kept suppressing. And
Right.
and when I did finally seek help and was vocal about it, like, yes, this is my experience, this is what I've been through. The backlash that I got from so many people for speaking out on experience that impacted like a huge part of my life. It was just amazing to feel even much smaller than I already was. Um, and it's just so many layers to this. Um, you
Yeah.
know,
So like I know for me, that it was just much easier to stay quiet. I mean, we had a similar experience on that level,
Mhm.
and I kept feeling the pressure of if I just make everything as normal as I can for me and the children, and we don't talk about it, we had this experience, I shouldn't have to talk about it, right?
Right. Mhm.
And you're striving to move forward, but something you can feel that there's this big gaping hole of something that's lacking and you don't know how to fill it.
Right.
And but when I did come out with it in certain levels, some people supported me and some people didn't. So you were talking
Mhm.
about that you didn't have that kind of support at all when you started opening up about it. So with having children, how did that affect the children when you started?
Um, when when we divorced, my daughter was about 2 or 3, so she doesn't remember.
Okay.
My son, who's a little bit older, a few years older than her, remember bits and pieces. He does remember, dad hitting mom and
Mhm.
things like that. Um, the only times do I speak about it now because they know I do volunteer for breaking the silence
Right.
um and I talk about it openly. They don't really ask questions. They're kind of going through their own situation with their father. So that's a whole nother story. So
Hmm.
they're very supportive of me being vocal about it, which is great because I feel like showing the children that we can break a cycle, that we can break out the mold, that we don't have to conform, we can step outside of the box and do things that align with our own core beliefs that necessarily don't even, kind of is parallel to our culture. Because
Right.
at the end of the day, yes, we are Cambodian. Yes, I'm a woman, but at the end of the day, I'm human. You
Yes.
know, I deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, just like anyone else, no matter what culture I'm from. And I think that's where we kind of need to shift the way that we view things. Um, but culture is such a big thing. It's like this construct that's embedded into everyone. And I know that it's kind of hard to break from that because that's how we're molded into this kind of little niche in our lives. And going back to my children, I just feel like I needed to start being vocal about this because not only, let's see, not only am I breaking the mold in my culture, um, it is something that's super important to speak on. I no longer wish to be silent. I gone through years of being quiet, being dismissed, being ignored. Um, and paving the way for myself to be seen and heard has been one of the most challenging but most fulfilling thing I ever done. You know, um, I lost my train of thought, Tara. Sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. Yeah. So, uh, this is probably a good place to just take a break. We'll take a break.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll say that. Okay, so we're going to take a break and we'll be back with Sammie Rose and we'll discuss more about her journey into healing and how she feels like we can overcome some of these cultural constructs that tend to hinder survivors telling their stories. Okay, give you a break to take a drink. You're doing great, Sammie. You're
Thank
doing great.
you.
So, absolutely. Okay, so we'll come back. And in three, two, one. Hi, we're back here at Through the Eyes of Survivors, and we're talking with Sammie Rose. And so we were talking about now we're going to move forward about like your healing process and your journey and how you think culturally you can help others within your own culture to kind of move forward, or people who have cultural hindrances in moving through situations in domestic violence as well. So like Sammie, so once you got out, you said you started to heal. What was that like for you? What was your process?
It was hard because I felt like I had to hide that. I had to hide my healing process in the beginning because that's something that we just don't do in our culture. Um, we don't seek help. Seeking help is a sign of like emotional fragility, and
Yeah.
and that means weakness. And we're a culture that's built on strength, no matter what you're going through. That's something that we place a high value on. And for someone to say that I need help, or for myself, like I need help, I need to process this, you know, it's saying that, you're too weak to deal with life. And I had to really let go of that ideal and seek therapy. I'm the only one in my family that has done therapy. Um, and it was really hard because in the beginning, a little bit after the divorce, I delved into alcohol into alcohol, and I used drinking to cope, which led, it's a progressive disease, and it led to so many other things. But in order for me to heal, I had to address why I was wanting and needing to drink. And that was because of the trauma that happened after the DV. It was that wound that was open that didn't get a band-aid.
Right.
No one offered that support. And I really did it on my own in the beginning. I sought help. I attended a DV's women's group for about 3 months. Unfortunately, they shut down, so I was no longer in that group. It took me about, let's see, that was 2012. It wasn't until 2017. So it was a number of years before I actually went into therapy and said, hey, at first I thought drinking was the problem. And then through therapy, I was like, you know what? It was a symptom of the problem. The problem was the trauma that I haven't addressed. And so healing, I'm still in the process of healing. I've been in therapy for 5.5 years, and I'm barely touching base on the DV. And it's just been my shift in thinking, and the way that I feel about my experience has shifted from, I was a victim. Oh, woe is me. Oh, pity me. Or other feelings of I deserve that. Now I know today that no, I didn't deserve any of that. But today I can reframe my thoughts and tell myself, you've gone through what you went through with this person, with your dad, with other relationships, but it does not define you. And it was so hard to process that, because I feel like when you're abused, you think just about that period of why
Right.
you're being abused, and you stay stuck in that, and you spend a lot of time ruminating, feeling all these feelings that you need to put into little boxes, and you weren't able to do that ever.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really new. It was new for me to get into therapy and be able to label things, and identify the feelings attached to that. That has helped me tremendously in how I deal with my experience today.
Yes. It's really hard as survivors to not, and people in general, just to not want to put a label or a claim, like you said, categorize it, um, that this created this created that, because you want to
Mm-hmm.
think along the lines of there's got to be something that, is created along here in the experience that once you figure it out, then that will never happen again, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and um it's hard, it's very challenging, because sometimes you just got to go, no, this part of this was just evil, it was just insidious, this was just wrong.
Yeah.
And there is no other explanation, and finding the acceptance of that, just to accept that in that moment, or that this person has a weakness. I mean, even with me, with my mom, it was hard to take and go, this was her weakness that stemmed from her abuse, which
Mhm.
stemmed from, my grandmother's abuse from great, generations. And it's not an excuse. Every
Right.
generation seems to think they're doing better,
Mhm.
and I'm sure, um, I don't want to speak too much for your culture, but I'm sure culturally, with you being born here in America and everything, you guys think you're progressing with each generation as well. It's not the same as back in the home
Right.
country, but
Yeah.
at the same time, it's so a part of who you are. Who are you without your culture,
Mhm.
without your family, and how do you move forward and explain all of this? It's unexplainable at sometimes, but I do think that what I love to tell people all the time, through our experiences, is that we're establishing kind of survivors. We're our own kind of a tribe. Um, and a lot of times as survivors, it's best to like seek out other people who know that experience, because they relate to you, they speak our language, right? And we're all at different stages of what we have. These words that you hear and see out, in the domestic violence world of, oh, I'm a survivor, or I'm a thriver, or, I call myself a warrior. I think each one is a stage level of
Mhm.
like, as a survivor, I've gotten through it. As a thriver, I've learned to live through my experience and kind of share so that I can advocate some. And as a warrior, you've really moved on to where you can really advocate and champion and kind of be a mentor to others who've had our experiences. And so, Sammy, I'm wondering, like, what would you say, like, to women in your culture that could help them kind of move into these stages, or how do you think you can help yourself even move through those stages if you have?
It's funny that you asked that because I've thought about that and I really don't know how to navigate that. Just to give you an example of how stigmatizing it is in our culture. Upon doing research, just specifically for Cambodians women that endure DV, there isn't a lot of research done on it. There isn't a
Mhm.
lot of, even if you go on YouTube and you enter Cambodian domestic violence, there's not a lot of videos that pop up. And then what that tells me is that maybe we're this really silent community that isn't vocal about it, that there's not even research that shows evidence of this happening. Although I think in about a very high percentage in our culture, women go through this.
Mhm.
And I can only speak for myself and what I can do for others. I
Right.
do want to be the change. I do want to be the voice. If you don't have a voice, let me carry you until you find your voice, right? I use all of my experiences stemming from, what I went through as a child with my father, suppressing my emotions, the physical discipline. I'm seeing my mother get beat for the first and last time, carrying this on into different relationships throughout my young adulthood. And then my ex-husband relationship and enduring that and finally leaving and processing it years later. I've used everything as a catalyst to be that change. I finally went back to school to be able to gain a profession where I'm able to help people in many
Right.
different areas of their life. And I turned my entire life around, struggling with alcoholism because that was my only coping mechanism, dealing with the abuse that I've been through, and just trying to turn all that pain, um, into something, into any sort of progression for myself and the community. I feel like that's the best that I can do.
Absolutely. Well, if there's anything else that you would like to say to survivors who are dealing with similar situations within your culture, what would you say to them?
Um, I would say it's okay to step outside the box. Um, you have to let go of expectations that are placed upon you, especially when they don't align with your own core beliefs and values. Your culture, although it's such a big part of your life, doesn't have to define you or dictate how you carry yourself and how you handle life as it comes. Nobody deserves abuse, whether you're a man or a woman, and it's not even specific to one culture. Like I said before in the interview, we are all human at the end of the day, and we all deserve to be loved unconditionally. We deserve to be safe, even like psychologically safe, right? I think
Right.
that's one of the biggest things that we kind of overlook, to feel that safety, just not on the inside, but the outside as well, you know. And it's okay to seek help and speak up, letting go of everything that you thought about abuse go.
Mhm.
I think that's what the message that I would like to send.
Well, that's a powerful message. And so, um, just because I want to add the aspect of where people can see how you are thriving today. So today, are you in where you feel like a healthy relationship and a healthy path in your journey? And how is that? What does that look like for you today?
Well, today I honor myself. I feel worthy. I feel deserving. I strive for healthy relationships, whether that's romantic, friendships, even with family, Um, what I've learned in recent years are boundaries. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's so important for everyone to kind of instill for themselves and others. There are many different types of boundaries: time boundaries, physical boundaries, mental boundaries, whatever it is. I learned to set the tone for myself. And if no one, let's say someone kind of overrides that, then I can't allow that person in my life, because it's impacting my peace, for one. And
Mhm.
secondly, if this person is constantly overstepping my boundaries, it's a red flag for me to say, this is not it.
Right.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap this up that you'd like to say as a final thought?
Um, on the journey to healing, you have to realize at the end of it, you are going to love yourself. Hmm.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great thought. Thank you. Thank
Hmm.
you so much, Sammie, for being here. And this concludes this episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. Please check out our website at Break the Silence at dv.org. And we have all kinds of volunteer opportunities. So you can join us and be a volunteer like Sammie is. The application is there on the website. And we hope to see you in our next episode.